morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Happy Sunday. Happy you are here. Welcome to our weekly Sunrise Project call. I'm always glad to see people popping in every weekend, and this is a safe space filled with love and compassion and our desire, as we always have, to heal ourselves and to heal our families. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And Dr. Linda is back with us this week, and we both just came in from a morning walk. So we are getting it together and getting ourselves situated here. So a little bit tardy this morning, but really happy to be here and want to welcome back to our monthly support group, our monthly session. We have Dr. Linda McGhee, who has been with us since the very beginning, over 4 years ago. She is one of our resident experts and a dear friend, an incredible professional. She's a clinical psychologist, attorney, and nationally recognized mental health expert, and speaker. And she's been featured in the Washington Post, Forbes, New York Times, Huffington Post, Grown and Flown, and BET's America in Black special on the state of mental health in the Black community. She has provided so much incredible wisdom to so many of us. And she is also an author of a chapter in a book on bipolar disorder and the essentials of multicultural assessment, of which she does. So she does testing for children. And I was so grateful to have her do testing with mine years ago. She has served on the clinical faculty at the Washington School of Psychiatry and is a former adjunct professor at George Washington University and the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. She serves as a former president of the Maryland Psychological Association, and ultimately, she is a friend. I feel like she's a family member. She's part of our community. She is incredible, and I'm just grateful that she is here and is here with us once a month. We open up the floor for a monthly first Sunday conversation where we're providing an opportunity for people to share what may be on their mind, a challenge they might be dealing with or we might be dealing with. And Dr. Linda's here to help us work through it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Linda McGhee and also welcome people to share and to open the floor. And if you're calling in, just a friendly reminder, you can hit *6 to come off of mute on your phone. If you're on Zoom, on your computer, or on video, you're welcome to come off of mute that way as well. But Dr. Linda, thank you for being here,
Good
especially as you're running in.
morning. Good
Yes, you're running in from
morning.
your
I
beach
just
walk.
I drove in from Delaware this morning back to my Silver Spring home. And I just want to say good morning to you, Kelly, and sort of keep you on the screen for a second, because one of the things that we were chatting about this morning was juggling, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so I wanted to, and for most of us, that means juggling maybe elderly parents, juggling our, children who are stressed in some way, shape, or form, juggling our businesses and our careers, even though we're getting to ages where it's not so easy. And I don't know about you, Kelly, but my energy is not the same.
Mhm.
Like for the example, this week you said you flew to Florida. Well, I started the week in Delaware, came back to DC for a speech, went back to then went to Chestertown, Maryland, and then back to Lewis. So, and then I'm back here today.
Yes.
So I wanted to just throw that out there, to see if anyone wanted to start our discussion about just how do you mentally deal with all your roles and just the hectic nature of today's world.
Yeah, I will just build on what you just said. Well, someone may want to share as well. I was listening to your travels. I took a day trip to Sacramento this week for
Mm-hmm.
a meeting. And from the DC area, there used to be a
No direct.
nonstop. There's no
Mm-hmm.
nonstop anymore. So I left on whatever day it was at 8 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
and had a connection, got to Sacramento about 5 p.m. Eastern
Mm-hmm.
time, went to my meeting, and then got back on the plane at 11:40 p.m. and was heading to New York, but that particular flight was delayed over 2 hours. So I felt
Mm-hmm.
like that was divine intention to say, do not go to New York to go to some
Mm-hmm.
event to get some award. It's irrelevant, and your body is
Mm-hmm.
saying, go home. So
Mm-hmm.
I made a conscious decision in that airport to get on the flight to get back to DC
Mm-hmm.
so I could spend the day catching up, but also sleep in my own bed. And that was a big deal from a self-care perspective, but
Mm-hmm.
I would not have made that choice but for the
Right.
flight being late.
And
And
it
that's
was so
that's
funny. I
not
think that was the day you and I spoke, and I was just like, Kelly, that's a lot. Anybody else out there? So Dee Sapp is our executive director. Dee was on the line talking about her juggling things. And Dee, you have anything you want to add about how you do it?
The reality is I have no idea. Most days I feel like I am just floating. Like this morning, I am exhausted. The last, I would say, 10 days, I have been on 6 planes, probably 8 different cities. And, I was mentioning, and I want to say like 6 of those planes were all delayed. So, it's stressful when you have connections and you're worried
Mm-hmm.
about plane landing. But, I was sharing that immediately upon my return home, I realized that coffee had spilled in my laptop bag. So my laptop was ruined. Um, and I was trying to rush to get to a Zoom meeting that didn't happen because of, a spill. And then, I had an aunt pass yesterday morning. Um, my youngest child told me upon my return that he signed up for track as we were going through.
Told you, not asked you, right?
Right. He told me as we were driving to his end of season swimming
Mhm.
banquet, so it's like, to most people, these are no big deals. But when you're trying to clean up, one situation, because I was in Australia with my son that has autism. So that, you know, mentally, I've not really come down from that space, and you get thrown into so many other spaces. So there's just no time mentally or physically to recoup.
Right.
So I can't offer any advice. I'm just floating right now.
All right. Anybody else feeling like, I'm just checking in with everybody. Anybody wants to unmute yourselves and tell us how you're doing,
This
how
is
you're
Vanessa.
coping? Hi,
My
Vanessa.
name. Hi. I just want to share. I just think. Is that D? I couldn't catch the name.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
DSAP. Mm-hmm.
yeah. I just thank her for sharing that, because sometimes when we feel like, when we're juggling and stressed, we feel alone, right? Like it's only us. And just to know that just to know I'm not alone. There's other people that's going through things. Um, that in itself has encouraged me, that I feel like I'm not alone. And I feel like, just having a space to listen to others is actually making me feel stronger, that I think I could make it, because I'm not by myself in this. So thank you.
absolutely. That's been the biggest learning for me this past 4 years. One of the biggest, that we're not alone.
And like we've been more encouraged to check in with people now because of how the isolation has gotten to people. So just hearing from people, like I sometimes jot down on my calendar to check in with someone, or when the spirit moves me. Like I called Kelly the other day. Kelly, how are you doing? Kelly rattles off like how everybody in her family was doing. And I'm like, no, how are you doing? Just the ability to check in with people. But thanks, Vanessa, for sharing that, because we all don't want to appear as though we're struggling, but everybody is struggling. Anybody else want to check in and just tell us how you're doing, or any other question that you might have?
Yeah, I wanted to share. I had the same thoughts as Vanessa.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that when Dee was talking, she was saying this might not be a big deal to some people, and I was thinking, not a big deal to who? because
Right.
but it's something I think we're all guilty of in feeling like that it's just us. And
Right.
something I constantly have to remind myself because I'll say, "Oh, I'm having a hard time," and then I have to come to the realization that anyone in this same situation would be having a hard time. I'm not having a hard time. I'm doing hard things.
Right.
Um, I'm just having a regular time. But
Right.
it is good to hear that you're not alone in that. I think we are guilty of feeling like that we should be able to do more or that we should be able to handle everything or that it's just subjective. It's our perception. And when really we're doing, we're moving mountains and we're not really giving ourselves credit for how much we're actually doing. And that wouldn't be easy for
Well,
anybody. And that's something I have to remind myself of quite often because I just feel like, oh, I should be able to just do this, and handle all the things that come my way. And self-care and all, and I should be doing it with ease. And that's not realistic, but I don't know why we sell ourselves that dream.
right. Do you ever find yourself like apologizing and when you're asked for help or saying, I'm sorry because I actually have a lot of people that call and they apologize before they ask for something.
Absolutely. I find myself apologizing for it. And then when people say, "Oh, I understand," I feel like, "Oh, they're just being nice. Do they really understand? Is this really understandable? Am I doing enough?" But yeah, I find myself apologizing if I'm too tired, if I need to take a mental break. Um, I do. I find myself apologizing and I find myself feeling guilty.
Hmm.
Um, like when Kelly was describing, deciding to, just go home. When I make choices like that, I find myself feeling guilty. Like I could tack this extra thing on. I could, oh, I got a last minute call to come to this event. I could go. I could go. And if I say, you know what, I'm tired. I'm mentally exhausted. I've had a rough week. My kids are this and that. I feel guilty and I feel like I'm making excuses and I should just suck it up and go and push through and I'll be okay. And I mean, would I get through it? Yes. Would I survive? Yes. But would I be okay? Like, what's the definition of being okay? Is just I'm still standing, being okay, rather than a standard of I am, giving myself rest. I am giving myself time to recuperate. I am being forgiving to myself, being the standard of being okay. And
You
these are
know,
conversations with myself all
I've
the time.
been I've been doing a lot of thinking about this in terms of our parenting. And one of the things that comes up to me is that some of this is coming from our trauma, right? Like we're apologizing for needing help. We're expecting other people to judge us or not be empathetic. We add on that last thing, even though we've already driven ourselves into the ground. And we don't, it's hard for us to take the option of turning something down or telling someone no. One of the things I'm personally working on is even when I told someone yes, and if my body is just giving out, to figure out ways to like say no, even though I've already said yes.
Mhm.
Um, and so, I'm thinking like a part of this stuff is because of trauma. But also I think, Kelly and I've talked about this a lot, is that you build the muscle of saying, I'm checking in with my body. It's Thursday afternoon. I know I promised to do that thing on Thursday evening, but my body is just so tired. I just cannot get redressed, get back in the car, do something else. And giving ourselves permission to do it, and then like figuring out ways to talk to people about it. Right. I get notes from people that say, I said I was gonna do this and I'm just exhausted. I can't do it. And I'm good with that. But when I do it myself, I have feelings about it. So I just want to throw that out there, that part of it might be about trauma. Does then somebody else want to talk about it? Or do you have anything else?
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, we apply different standards for
Mm-hmm.
ourselves than we
Mm-hmm.
do to other people when it comes to forgiveness, rest, um, even the way we are critical of ourselves. Like, would you say this to someone you loved? And then
Right.
you have to ask yourself, are you someone you love? And why am I
Right.
speaking to myself this way? Why am I not giving myself grace? How
Right.
do we reprogram that?
Right.
It's
That's
a
my question too.
it's a slow process. Anybody wants to weigh in on this, but one of the things that me personally, I had to come to the conclusion of, it was about my own issues with confidence and self-esteem. And I'm just going to lay it out there. You know, I had to value myself, right? I tell this story all the time about how when I wanted to start the long road toward getting more fit, I debated for months about whether or not I could afford an exercise class, even though, I had a job, and then whether my child could spend 10 minutes in aftercare while I went to the exercise class. I mean, I had that debate for months and months and months. So then you start to think about turning it around, right? Would I have debated about paying for somebody else's exercise class? Would I've debated about waiting 10 minutes? Or would I have counseled someone to have their child wait 10 minutes? Yes, for the mother to go to an exercise class. So I had to do a lot of deep work about me and how I felt about me, and do that work, came to the conclusion that I could afford to do some of these things as to prioritize myself. Now, the last thing I want to say about that, and we talk about self-care on here all the time, women in particular are not programmed by the world to take care of themselves. We're programmed to take care of our parents when they're elderly, our children, our husbands, organize things at work. All of that comes from societal expectations. So there's not just internal issues with our feelings about self, it's the way that society sort of programs us to take care of other people. So it's a bit of a process. And I will tell you that when I went away for a retreat a couple of weeks ago, I still have feelings of, should I be doing this? But then it kind of now passes.
Mhm.
Kelly, have you had those experiences, like when you're taking care of yourself, that you feel a little bit guilty?
Yes. Last night I got to Florida um for the week. I decided to work from here this week and didn't know Chris, the 18-year-old, had a swim meet. He swam last weekend. So I assumed someone said, well, if he swims the Patriot League, he won't be swimming next weekend. So I said, okay. But I talked to Chris last night. He goes, you coming tomorrow? And I said, what's tomorrow? He said, some sort of qualifier, something or other. And I said, no, I'm in Florida. But oh my gosh. And I sat with that, didn't apologize. I said, no, I'm not going to be able to be there. I'm in Florida. But I got off the phone and had such guilt. But I've been in every other meet all
Mhm,
year.
mhm.
So
I'm gonna just throw this out here again. My parents didn't come to very much of my track meets or my tennis matches, and I definitely wanted to be at mostly everything my son did, and I'm glad that I did. I think it's a good confidence boost for the child. But out of 200 swim meets, if you miss one,
it's not
Kelly,
a big deal.
yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm over that.
But
But
again, the reason why we're on here talking about it is because it's easier said than done, right?
right. But I want to ask you a question about, and
Mhm.
it's related to what one of the speakers just said. Why do you overcommit? And why do we as people sometimes overcommit? What is that about? Because it's like this treadmill of overcommitment.
Right. I think part of it is the hustle culture, right? We're all trying to get ahead. A lot of us within hearing distance of my voice are running their own businesses. And for those of you who are running your own businesses, we that's just challenging. right? D says they think we overcompensate for the things we did not have or get as children. That's a very good point. Uh-oh. Have I lost y'all? Let me see.
No, you're there. You're frozen,
Okay.
but we can still hear you.
Okay, for some reason I'm not seeing y'all. But in any event, I think we also, like, on a practical note, Kelly, I think that we are not good estimators of time, right? And a lot of that has to do with our executive and functioning, the fact that we're overcommitted. But I don't think we're good estimators of time. So now I will think that I can get done 4 or 5 things in a day, work wise. But the fact of the matter is, I rarely get to 2. So I just don't think we're very good at estimating time. And so a lot of times now I will be like, okay, I started off with 4. And what I do when I work with kids with executive functioning, I just tell them to acknowledge that they're not good estimators and cut their list in half. Whatever they thought they were going to do, cut it in half. So why do you think you overestimate? And that's not just for Kelly, that's for everybody.
Yeah.
Can I mention something that I think
Sure.
that when you mention trauma, right?
Mhm.
Like that's what, and so I'm just gonna share this because I feel like what the root for me is a feeling of never feeling like I'm enough. And then I had to think like, well, where is that coming from? So somebody talked about childhood in the chat. And so I think before I was born, so I'm just gonna tell you my family history. My mom, right? She was dating my father, right? She was dating a married man, right?
Mhm.
So he was married with children. And then I don't know at what point in the relationship, I don't know if he divorced, but then I was a product of that
Mhm.
relationship, right? And then my mom, in her own family, was the black sheep of her family because I just think she has some form of mental illness. So she was always like the black sheep. So me
Mhm.
being born as a product of, I guess, I don't know, like what you call the woman, the mistress woman
Mhm.
situation. So there's, you know, I always grew up never feeling like, no, I didn't know where I belonged. I was never accepted in my mom's family. Definitely shame on that situation with my half. So
Mhm.
never felt that I was enough. So
Mhm.
growing up, I always just, I think I always just tried to be a part, be accepted. I'm like I chronically join organizations, just trying to please. I think I yearn for a level of acceptance, and I
Mhm.
think that's what drives you know, why I keep doing things to try to feel enough. So if I felt that I was enough and I'm whole, I don't think that I would make some of the choices that I do. So
Right.
I just try to think of the root of what's
Well, and
driving my
also
behavior.
a lot of Black women use their careers to sublimate a lot of things that they're not getting outside of their careers. And
True.
that's where we see like people just joining everything. But do you notice though that, and stay with me for a second, that is never enough?
Mhm.
We can never, one of the things I realized a few years ago is that you could strive for all those things. You could become president of this, you could do that. And I'm not putting those things down. So I want everyone to hear me, because a lot of y'all out here are leading and y'all making opportunities for the next generation and for our children. So you're doing amazing things, but when we're out there trying to fill voids, it never seems like it's enough, because there's something deeper that makes us not feel like we're good enough, whether or not we take another position or another committee spot ever again.
Mhm. Mhm.
And just like when you're coming from that place, it's not just that we're always seeking out roles, we're looking at what other people are doing. I mean, it's just a wholly unhealthy way of being that I think comes out of trauma, both generational trauma and societal trauma. even our own family lives. It just comes from so many sources, but it's never satisfied until we work on loving ourselves a little bit more. And it's a work in progress for all of us. Don't you think? I mean, I don't think you ever get there, but I think like sometimes you have to move in that direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Sounds like a lot more work to do
It
to unpack.
it does, but that's what therapists are for. I will say that is that, I, the therapist, have a therapist, right? And because you don't see your own blind spots, even if you are a therapist. So, I don't do any better at parenting and all those other things that many of you do, as many of you do. But in terms of having somebody help you unpack that, like the amount of insight that you've shown in the last 5 minutes is just absolutely phenomenal. And most people never get there. They never get there to understand that they don't feel like they're enough. That's why they have to do those things. And so you've gotten like really, really far, but just getting to the point where you start thinking about yourself and honoring yourself and looking at the things that all the amazing things that you are, also can be helped by having somebody to talk to, that is good at unpacking. It's
Thank
not
you.
it's not work that you do in one day, right? And you don't have to bite it all off. I personally have gone to therapy in chunks of time. No, a year here, 2 years there. Work on one issue. Work on your family of origin. Work on what happened with your parents, and then you might go work on your marriage and your kids, and you might go work on the fact that you're a perfectionist. Somebody put that in a comment, right? Where we're so striving so hard that we're creating anxiety, right? And perfectionism is a sort of a defense against anxiety. So, I mean, I'm just sort of letting you know, or just wanted to say one more time before we move on, is that working on yourself is rewarding. It's not sometimes easy, but it can be, you can put it into bite-sized parts.
Yeah.
Anybody else out there that wants to talk about what they're struggling with or what's happening with them?
I did want to share. I know I shared already. I hope y'all are getting sick
That's
of me.
okay.
I did want to share a thought that has been on my mind recently, and it came up thinking about, you know, ourself. When you're talking about self-worth, um, you know, I had come to the conclusion that when I'm going through a hard time, I avoid people because I don't feel like I have enough to give to them. I feel like I should be doing something for them to deserve the space that I'm in. And I felt like, well, it's because I'm going through a hard time. I don't want to bring people down and I just don't have much to give. Well, I recently experienced something positive happened. I got a promotion at work and I was very hesitant to share, also feeling like this wasn't worth the space or this isn't. I'm like, it's not just related to me not being able to give to someone or me having a hard time, but just in general, not feeling worthy of the space that I'm in or worthy of others' times or just a feeling valued by other people, even though I'm not getting feedback from people saying, we don't want to hear that, we don't care. You know, they welcome me when I do work it up to myself to come to them. And I have to force myself, like Brianna, just say something to them,
Right.
then make the phone call because I realized I was isolating myself. But feeling, and I don't know if anybody else feels that same way, but convincing yourself that you are worthy and deserving of the spaces that you're in and of taking up people's time, not because you have earned it or because you're giving something to them, but just being deserving of taking up the time or space with people, period, that especially people that you care about. That is something I struggle with and always feel guilty.
Right. You know, we have a lot of assumptions about what people are thinking about us before we call them or when we're isolating. And the fact of the matter is that most of the time when we do pick up the phone and when we do reach out, people are so happy to hear from us. Especially during this time where there was a lot of isolation because of the pandemic, people are just starving for connection. And for you to really consider tackling those thoughts about your only usefulness is if you could do something for someone. A lot of times just being in their world, calling to say hi, asking if you guys can meet for coffee, anything like that, people are just really grateful to hear from their friends and their loved ones. And in order to tackle that, you need to just acknowledge that comes to your head, but push through it, right? Because a lot of times the reward is truly worth it, right? You get to connect with somebody you haven't connected with in a long time. And the other thing that I just wanted to add in is that, a part of the not feeling like we're enough and, our trauma is that we minimize the good and emphasize the bad. Right. And so what I want everybody that's listening today is to think, I try now to really celebrate victories. Whereas I was a person before that was just like, oh, this happened and I'm not going to make a big deal of it. Is to make a little bit of a big deal of it and accept when somebody gives me flowers, either the real kind or the metaphorical kind, and sit with it. Right. So with your children too, I urge you to celebrate your own personal victories, celebrate victories for your children, because we all know that they're going to be hard times and they're going to be weeks and months where you're not celebrating and weeks and months where you are burdened, like we were talking about at the beginning of the call. So even if you just write yourself a card or write in your journal, congratulations to me for getting that promotion, or you take yourself to lunch or you go to lunch with a friend and say, I'm going to celebrate my promotion. Take time to celebrate this life small victories, because it just makes them a little bit more sweeter. It makes us stop and be present in a moment to recognize that this is a good thing, right? And it holds us for when things aren't so great. So I just urge everyone to consider when the good things happen, celebrate. When it happens with kids, I tell people all the time, celebrate the good days. Celebrate the milestones. I'm happy to see Dee and Kelly put their kids' swimming victories and honor roll victories and all these things online or tell people about them, because it's a good thing. And we should celebrate it. Also, as African Americans, we should celebrate our children and lift them up. But in the same way, we should lift ourselves up too. Right? What you would do for your kid, a lot of times we won't do for ourselves. I'm seeing one point, in order to be financially secure, I have to juggle my life or my life will fall apart. Yes, that is true. There's no question that many of us have things in our lives, financial obligations in our lives that require us to hustle. But to consider how long you can stay at the peak hustle level, right? It may be temporary, you may have crises, but the body and the mind and the spirit are not meant to run 100 miles an hour in perpetuity. And, to sit down and think about what it is that you need. Can I make that tuition payment? But also to try to not run yourself into the ground while doing it. Someone said being present and connecting is doing something I have to keep in mind. Yes. Just acknowledging where you are. We just speed, and rush through everything, right? We never just take the time to say, hey, Kelly, I noticed that, our Kelly calls me up and says, I turned in my book chapters or whatever. Like, just take time to celebrate, even if it's just through your text chain of close friends, or even if it's just through your closest friend or your loved one or your mom. Take time to say, hey, this thing happened to me. And it is good because it keeps you in the moment. Sometimes it keeps us from worrying about what's going to happen the next day. And it keeps us from hyper focusing on things like our children, when they're struggling. Anyone else? I think there was someone that was trying to come on earlier and that there was another caller.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in real quick. This is
Mhm.
Nation. Yeah, I definitely get everyone what they are saying. I own my own business. I'm a life and leadership coach and working with a lot of leaders and various people, whether executives or what have you. And of course, I care for my mom who has Alzheimer's. And so it has been a juggling act. I work with about 6 clients a day. I work only 4 days a week, but still that can be a lot. And
25 clients is a lot.
yeah, yeah. And so
Just
and at one
saying.
point, yeah, it is. And I dropped, at one point, especially during the pandemic and all the George Floyd. I mean, it was so many clients were looking for Black, coaches to work with, and of course, because they couldn't find therapists, and I have a master's degree in counseling and all of that, but they couldn't find, it wasn't enough therapists to work with. So of course, and they were going through so many microaggressions at work and all of that. And it was so much. And so at one point I had dropped down to 3 days a week. And then when all that was happening, I picked back up another day because there were so many needs. But then I realized for myself, I was starting to feel burnt out as well. And
Mm-hmm.
and so I had to kind of fall back a little bit on my time and the energy because, in the midst of that, life was still happening.
Mm-hmm.
Losing a mother-in-law, still taking care of my mother, my daughter with her mental health crisis, living here. I do have a husband and we have a great marriage, but it was like little time for us to be able to get those pockets of time for ourselves and all of that. And so, I even felt ashamed. I was getting my website updated, with my website designer, and it literally took 3 years to do
Mm-hmm.
it because it was so much happening, in between
Mm-hmm.
me having knee surgeries and hip replacements, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh my God. So I realized for myself that, I had to pace, my process and
Mm-hmm.
my progress, right? And realizing that
Mm-hmm.
all the things that I was doing, I had to, stop with the podcast for a while and stop with
Mm-hmm.
so many other things, with the trainings and all of the stuff that I was doing and traveling and I had to just kind of be in one place, as I tell my client, be where your feet are. And it was challenging, right? And I realized, what I needed to do was to say no to some things, to be able to rest when I need to rest. Even, working from home, it's that temptation of, okay, let me finish up all the notes for the clients, or let me do, and sometimes I'm just tired. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
and when you have clients that they're in crisis, right? I mean, with
Mm-hmm.
all the layoffs that are happening and all the things that are going on, and which is impacting them not only professionally but personally, it's a lot. And so I
Mm-hmm.
realized how important it is to shut things down at a
Mm-hmm.
given time and to tell
Mm-hmm.
myself enough is enough. You have to know when enough is enough and that I can get back to that at another time, but to make sure
Yep.
that I'm making space and room for myself And because I'm only one person, and
Right.
I can, you know, and so, and I'm realizing more than ever how much important rest is, just to be able to sleep and to
Right.
take a nap, you know. And so yeah, but I go through the same thing of trying to juggle it all. And like you said, we're kind of all at that age where the energy is just not there like it once was. And so it's important. I'm realizing more and more to take care of myself and to push back and know when I'm at my limit.
Yeah, the age, your body just changes. You know, I'm a high energy person. I usually can do a lot of things, but I've come to the realization that, you know, age is sort of a thing that you have to factor in and plan for when you're planning out your work. Like, you know, now after 8 p.m., I find my productivity is not very high. And so I'm having to like say, okay, even though I'm not finished with this, that happened to me last night. I just didn't want to do it anymore. But also I wanted to just say that in terms of all of us on here who are running our businesses, um, running your business is fine, well, and good, but we also have to understand in order to maximize self-care, it could be, or if you're tired of running a business, is to like just look at your whole financial picture, look at your whole mental health. Is this the time where I need to just get a job? Is this the time where I need to, you know, see if I could get a contract, or if I need to cut back and like try to figure out? I have a friend of mine who was struggling with private practice, and she just took a job because she just wanted to go somewhere 3 days a week. She didn't want to do all the things you have to do in order to run a business. And finally, the last thing I wanted to say is Kelly and I have talked about this. I mean, this is probably the subject we talk about more than even our kids is the word no, right? Saying it, meaning it, um, saying this year I'm gonna focus on my website and my this and my that, and saying no to everything else because you know you're taking care of your mother. You know you're doing these other things. And so there's no way you're going to get a podcast, a website, social media, new this, new that. So pick the things that you're going to do. But in order to do that, you have to say no to people. And a lot of times people do not want you to say no to them. And that is just one of the harder things that we have to like really start incorporating into our functioning is the ability to say no. Anyone else? I think in the comments there was something about estimating time, right? And it is something that we all struggle with. And we're all works in progress in that. But I want you all to think about this. When you're doing your to-do list every day, go back and look at what you actually get done. And go back and look at what time of the day are you most productive. Right? And then start to make adjustments. If you know that when you're making client notes, that's all you're going to do in a day because you're making the week's worth of clients' notes, then maybe consider not adding all those things. Sometimes what I do now is I'll do emails and things where people just want bios and things like that. I'll do that in the evening because that doesn't require as much thinking. So like figure out where you're overestimating your ability to do things and adjust, but also think about the time of the day that you're most productive and think about like when your body is the most energetic. And the last thing I want to say is this concept, going back to what the last speaker said, is this concept of rest. Rest is a revolutionary concept for people of color, but It is crucial. It's crucial to our emotional survival. It's crucial to our trauma processing, because your body's not meant to be on these high states of alert and stress all the time. So rest and relaxing are crucial. I've spoken many times on here about my ongoing battle to sleep, but it is really, really important. Who else has something on their mind?
I can share.
Okay.
First, I want to say thank you, Kelly, and thank you, McGhee, for having this platform. I've been on the platform for about a year now. Not every week, but certainly times when was certainly needed. So appreciate this platform. One thing that I try to do is, at least at this point, is ask for more help from people around me,
Mm-hmm.
including when things get tight with budgeting. And I'm
Yeah.
talking about budgeting financially,
Mm-hmm.
because we're spending money on psychiatrists, we're spending money on therapists
Mm-hmm.
straight out of pocket. And if
Mm-hmm.
it's for our baby, the budget is blown, right?
Right.
So but we're getting to a point now where I'm saying, you know what, we just need help financially. So
Mm-hmm.
we're reaching out to get help financially to help manage our budget. Now, of
Mm-hmm.
course, my undergrad major was business finance, but it comes to a point where you're too close to a situation to
Mm-hmm.
try and manage it. So
And do you ever find yourself having to say no when other family members want something because you're like busy supporting your own children? And I mean, yeah, these are some really, what you all are bringing up today is where most of us are living, right? Your
yeah,
average big city psychologist or your average big city psychiatrist are, $250 and up per session. And so these financial considerations are real.
mhm,
Asking for help is probably one of the biggest hurdles with regard to everything, because we don't want to ask for help. And a part of us not wanting to ask for help is that admitting that we need help, right?
right.
So tell me, so did you have more that you want to say? How, you're asking for help? How is that going? And how are you taking care of yourself even in your financial, crunch?
Well, we have a listing of financial people that we're going to reach out to.
Mm-hmm.
But I just woke up this morning, just saying that's what we need to do at this juncture.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we the small things we still do. My son is home from college, so he's taking 2 classes at the community college now.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been a plus.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, how I take care of myself is by speaking up and saying, "Do we have a budget for that?"
Mm-hmm.
I say that to him.
Mm-hmm.
I say that to my wife. Do we have a budget for that? Is that
Mm-hmm.
budget? How does that fit into our budget? So
Mm-hmm.
instead of yelling and screaming and saying, we ain't doing that, because that doesn't
Right.
work.
Right. Can we
I say,
do it? Is there a budget for it? Can we plan for it? Go ahead.
yeah. So kind of speaking of finding, when I was growing up, of course, you yell and scream until you got your way. But when you
Right.
marry and you got kids, especially a grown son in the house, that doesn't always work. So,
Right. You
finding
know,
ways.
right. Right. I mean, and I'm really glad that you said that, because somebody else needs to hear that on this line today. That the things that took us through childhood, the things that we learned from our parents, how our dad talked to our mom and the rest of the family, or how our mom talked to our dad, they don't necessarily work in modern times. They don't necessarily work with our kids, and they don't necessarily build the strongest of marriages, right? And to understand that we're all setting an example for our children. We're showing them how you treat a spouse. We're showing them how you deal with conflict. And, to just reflect on those items. And, understanding that we're not going to turn all this around in one day. But just to, the fact that you understand and realize that some of the methods that you knew may not be the most effective is a huge step. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think we have
It
time
looks
for
like
one.
Dee has her hand up.
Okay,
So
go
we
ahead,
can
Dee.
acknowledge Dee for sure.
Go ahead, Dee.
Hi, I wanted to respond to the gentleman that just
Uh-huh.
spoke.
Please.
And actually a couple of the other people who spoke up today.
Mm-hmm.
I have found definitely through this space and working with you, Dr. Linda, and working with Kelly extensively, that that your tribe of people actually helps get you through whatever. And I have had to shift my tribe this last couple of years, the people that I thought that, and I'm not going to say rely on, but they're no longer able to be resources for me. So specifically to the gentleman that spoke, probably everybody on this call has spoken about money and therapy, because therapy is expensive. I mean, Kelly knows, I've called her, I've had to write some really hefty checks, to cover therapy
Mm-hmm.
my son. But what I've also been able to do is through talking to other people, even strangers. I mean, people on this call are strangers. I've learned to be more resourceful. The more you talk to people about your situation, someone will say, "Hey, have you tried XYZ? Have you even, like Tina Lifford's Wellness Wednesday?" I've been able to cut some therapy sessions by attending other sessions, or, the same thing with college. I have now one in college, had two, but I've learned of like scholarships or even like free community college for Maryland. So
Mm-hmm.
telling your story, you connect with people,
Mm-hmm.
kind of relay information about resources you would have never thought of. So you may not get more money, but you may be able to save money
Mm-hmm.
because people have, they just know things that you don't know. So the
Mm-hmm.
thing has been huge for me, not, sharing your story, opening up in certain spaces, and willing to be vulnerable at certain times has definitely benefited me greatly.
Thank you so much. Those points are like, understanding that sometimes you may have to shift your tribe depending on what you're going through, and to tell your story. I think Kelly and I will both agree that talking about SonRise and putting it out there in the universe has been really, really helpful. And we are hoping for bigger blessings in the upcoming year, because we're out there trying to put out the word, trying to support parents who are going through what we're all going through each and every day. So Kelly, I want to come back to you and sort of ask you about some of your takeaways today as we conclude this call. Kelly?
Yep, yeah. I was thinking, I think the biggest, well, there were several takeaways. I think one is giving ourselves grace. That's a big one. I think two is learning to say no consciously. It's a positive no, I think, and ideally not overcommitting from the beginning, which means saying no at the beginning. And I think that no is really important. I think the third thing I would say is asking for help
Mm-hmm.
asking for help, and then changing your tribe or shifting when necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Shift because every
mm-hmm.
person's not necessarily the right person for every situation.
Mm-hmm.
Those
And,
are
you
my
know, Kelly,
takeaways.
I just wanted to add just one real quick. The fact that managing no is also a process. And I'm learning this year that when I've said no to people that I'm close to, that I have to manage that change and act with integrity and be open and communicate. So, you know, it's not just saying the word no, is that a lot of times we're saying no to people that that are in our tribe. And in order to do that, though, you have to like manage that with integrity, with honesty, and with transparency.
Yes. I
So
appreciate that.
on that note, I'm going to throw it back to you.
You throw it back to me. Did you want
Yes.
to summarize any of your thoughts on this while we're
Yeah, I mean,
before we wrap up?
I will do that quickly. Today, I think I heard from people that they are overwhelmed, and how they manage it is, you know, they're dealing with trauma, and the trauma, one of the trauma responses is hustling. And that some of it is societal based, where there's expectations on, you know, caregivers, providers, parents, but that we need to go through and do some inner work, set some plans for self-care. As my colleague Dee said, to take care of ourselves by reaching out, enlarging and changing and modifying the tribe, and to tell our stories. So that's how I will sum up today. I'm so happy to be with you all today. I'm happy that I got off the road 3 minutes before airtime today. And I appreciate being with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Linda, for being here. I can't thank you enough. As always, you have been such a friend and confidant and helper on my own journey and my family's journey. So I'll say a very brief prayer to close us out. Thank you so much, Father, for allowing Dr. Linda McGhee to be here once again with us at our call and on this open sharing support group call today. Help us, Father, know that we can say no. We can learn to say no. We can stop overcommitting. We can learn to get rest. We can take some time for a nap. We can give ourselves grace and ultimately learn to love ourselves unconditionally and fully and trust the process. Let's build in some self-love rituals. Help us learn to quiet our minds, smile more, walk outside, take moments for self-care. And please, Father, help us continue to love our children, provide space and care and oversight of our children as they walk their own special journeys in this life. Here's to a peaceful, powerful, positive, productive, and loving week. Have a beautiful day, everyone. And we will be back next Sunday at 9 a.m. for this wonderful support group. Have a fantastic day. And thank you again, Dr. McGhee.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you.